fed up of just saying I should have done better and I should have done this and I could have done that and whatever. If it takes time, I don't want it to take time. I should be doing it now. We should be winning now. I should be making better decisions than what I'm making. So
McLaren managed a 3-4 in Silverstone this weekend, a result that had been chuffed with 18 months ago, sure. But for the last 7 races since Lando took his debut F1 win in Miami, their package hasn't looked just good. It's probably been the best, even clear of Max and his Red Bull. Yet through Imola, Monaco, Canada, Spain, Austria and now Britain, the Papayans have failed to take a single victory. They've not been short of opportunities yet, they've continued to be unable to convert. So it does make me think, does McLaren have the minerals to really go toe-to-toe with Red Bull and Max, right, a team who's made this sport look easy for the last couple of years, or even Mercedes, a team that made it look easy for 8 years prior to the regulation change? With the evidence in front of us, it seems to suggest maybe not. My name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. I do think McLaren really let down their drivers this weekend, especially Oscar, because he didn't put a foot wrong all race. He could have won that. I think he might have even won that ahead of Lando. Even if they'd have nailed Lando's strategy, Oscar was on flames in the race. Now, of course, Lando has his culpability, okay? He chose to box a lap too late for slicks and then overshot his pit box, which cost him time and a front wing adjustment. But I do believe the lion's share of the blame for McLaren not converting a 1-2 this weekend sits with McLaren's pit wall, basically. Look, it is important for teams to listen to their drivers, especially in those conditions when you're going between slicks and intermediates. It can be a tricky one to get right. We all know what happened in Russia with Lando back in 2021, right? The team leaned too much on Lando and not enough on their radar. Lando couldn't have possibly seen the rain that was going to, come if he stayed on track, and, McLaren had the equipment to do so and decided to listen to their driver. This was a bit different this time around. The track was dry and McLaren were right to lean more on Lando, and he did. He literally says afterwards he made a misjudgment in terms of when he had to come in. Nothing can replicate the feeling a driver has in the car, but also the team needs to be cognizant of the limitations a driver has in terms of the information they have. And it's tough when you're up ahead as well. I mean, George Russell struggled when he got ahead in the race, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and you're driving into the unknown when the rain is coming down, when the track's getting wetter, because you don't know where the cells are falling necessarily, right? You're anticipating certain levels of grip from these corners, but you just don't know when you're ahead. Whereas if you're the car behind, and hence why Lewis, I think, was able to catch up and overtake George, is that he could see where George was getting grip, where he was losing grip, and could drive accordingly. He had more information because George was basically giving him a spoiler as to how much grip was at each corner. Because then Lando was able to catch and overtake Lewis Hamilton, and don't mention Oscar, right? He passed both Mercedes and then caught right up to the back of Lando's gearbox. I think every single driver deserves credit for keeping it on the tarmac this weekend. K-Mag was the closest to proper harpooning the ball out of Stowe. He caught it though, great save from K-Mag. And I do think the drivers were largely holding up their ends of the bargain. I think this race was won and lost, and I think many of the positions throughout the field were determined more by the decisions of the pit wall than the drivers. Yet Lando post-race seemed to take full responsibility really for the race unravelling the way it did. I didn't do a very good job today with the calls, knowing when to box. So many things are good, so many things are in place, just not executing the way I want to, the way I need to. And look, do I somewhat respect Lando's willingness to take on responsibility for what happened, because I think far too many drivers will just blame all outside factors and not take any personal accountability, okay? I respect that from Lando massively. And he is very tough on himself. And actually, I do maybe sometimes think too tough. Jenson Button, I think, said it really well post-race talking to Sky. You don't want to show your competitors that you're down. That's a weakness that you don't want to show. It's a fine line, isn't it? Taking on personal responsibility, as we all should, for things in life, but also he needs to have that mental strength to carry him through. That's a huge component in what leads to a world champion being a world champion, a decisive, selfish at times. There's not one mentality that works and doesn't. I mean, I think Lewis and Sebastian and Michael Schumacher and Senna and Prost and all of the greats over the years, they're not the same characters, the same people, but there are certain traits that you kind of really need to have. And Lando going so hard in on himself, I agree with Jenson. I think it's a weakness. Certainly in a sporting context, I agree, right? On a personal human level, no, I don't think so. But he's a Formula One driver, and if he wants to succeed, I almost think Lando needs a bit more ego. He's right to take accountability for the mistakes he made, which is, boxing a lap too late, and when he did box, he overshot the pit lane, which then resulted in them not being able to change the wing angle and lost probably a couple of seconds there through that as well. But this is a team sport, right? And Lando does not have to take the entire burden of that on his shoulders. I think the strategy team have way more culpability, in my opinion, for what happened. I use the word indecisive in the thumbnail, and I think that literally nails the problem as far as I'm concerned. Because look at Max, right? He made a decisive call for slick tyres. Max doesn't mention the hards. Red Bull makes the call for the hards. They listen to their driver. They use the information they have. They boxed him at the exact right moment. And Max went from being all out of sorts in this race to almost winning it. Lewis was told by his team that they thought it was time for inters, and Lewis decisively said no. The team listened, and yes, of course, the soft wasn't the right compound in the end, but the quality of Lewis Hamilton in his tyre management skills was able to hold on to those softs and hold on to the win. There's understanding, GP and Max, Bono and Lewis, these are partnerships that have existed for years and years and years within two of these hyper successful Formula One teams. There's a mutual understanding there, and very, very rarely do we get incidents of miscommunication and a lack of confidence in both parties. I know obviously Lewis has been very much challenged by Mercedes over recent times, and it's blown over a few times, but generally speaking, especially when Lewis was walking away with it for years, there was an incredible mutual understanding between driver and team. Unfortunately, the way I see it, there is a noticeable lack of confidence, assurance, decisiveness, mutual understanding, particularly between, I think, Lando and his side of the pit wall. And I say that with confidence now, and it's not just based off this one instance, but look at the way that Lando communicated with his pit wall this weekend, this Sunday, versus how Oscar was able to communicate with his. Will Joseph, Lando's race engineer, Tom Stallard, Oscar Piastri's race engineer. We've got the audio here. It's night and day.
Competitor cars do not have medium. Currently we think medium is the right tyre. 15 laps to go.
Yes, it's the best.
Okay, Hamilton's pitted. Hamilton has pitted.
I think box.
Copy, box.
Copy. We need to box. The soft is better now. Any slick tyre.
Okay, so we can choose a medium cover people like Verstappen, or we choose a soft to cover people like Hamilton.
Hamilton. I think Hamilton, or do you think medium? I don't mind.
We're going soft. Box this lap, please. Box this lap.
That's the odd thing to me, listening to this. So Oscar actually pitted before Lando at the more preferable time. Stallard literally says, the competitor cars don't have medium, we think medium is the right tyre. So why did Tom and Oscar's side of the garage think the medium was the right tyre one lap before Lando boxed, yet Lando ended up on the softs? Well, I think it was Lewis boxing on the softs, because obviously he boxed just before Oscar boxed. I think that made McLaren kind of second guess themselves. I think they would have gone for the medium if it wasn't for Lewis boxing on the softs. But also Lando, he did say the word soft. In fact, he said the word soft twice. But listen to the radio back. Read your driver, McLaren. He says soft twice, but then he backs both of those mentions of soft with
any slick tyre.
And
or do you think medium? I don't mind.
He's clearly not communicating with any decisiveness that he wants the soft. He's looking to the team, I think, in that instance, to be like, look, I just need a slick tyre. I want to go and win this race. You just put whatever you think is right on. McLaren weren't able to give Lando the decisiveness he needs in that instance to make a choice on compound, because, again, lean on the driver whether you're going slick or inter, fine. But in terms of compound, the team have got so much more information than Lando has about everyone else's pace. How are they doing on the hards? How are they doing on the soft? Lando said afterwards, the soft never worked on that McLaren. They knew it was a weak tyre on their car, yet they still elected to go with it based off of what Lewis in a different car. Lando seemed to believe that the Mercedes with a soft, it was more suited to their car than it was the McLaren. But what, Lando's messages? I mean, how can you listen to that radio from Lando and think, oh yeah, he definitely wants softs? He wants you to tell him. He just wants you to put a slick tyre on the car, McLaren. In contrast, you look at how clear Tom was with Oscar, how measured Oscar was in his response. That is the exact kind of concise communication we've come to expect from well, Max and GP, I think. Yes, of course, McLaren cocked up massively by letting Oscar do another lap and not double stacking them. But I think with Stallard and Piastri, they're onto something very good. And I genuinely think Will Joseph and Lando Norris should look back at how Tom Stallard and Oscar Piastri handled that situation, because the communication style, at least, was way better from, I think, both parties. This isn't the first time Lando and his pit bull have struggled communicating in those high pressure moments, and it's a weakness they absolutely need to iron out. I mean, even when it was Ricciardo and Stallard, we've heard Yuki cite Ricciardo's calmness on the radio and the way he just communicates and just is very diligent and very relaxed and very low energy on the radio as why Yuki has improved in that area. Because as things stand, I think once Oscar plugs that slight race pace deficit he has to Lando Norris, I think Oscar could be in position to spearhead a McLaren title challenge in 2025, unless Lando and Will work on this, I think, pretty clear weakness. I mean, consistency is key, right, if you want to fight for a title. Lando knows this. He came second in Formula 2 in 2018 behind Georgie Boy. He only won one race all season. Look at Paul Aron before this weekend, anyway, in Silverstone, the first 7 weekends, so 14 rounds. Didn't win a single race, yet was leading the championship. The ability to fight at the top, even if you don't win, is imperative. But when those opportunities to win present themselves, the points gap between winning in P2 is 7 points. You need to take those opportunities, and McLaren have had them and not converted. Silverstone was a clear and obvious chance for a 1-2 that McLaren let slip through their fingers, but then go all the way back. Obviously Miami, great. Lando wins, got lucky with a safety car. Oscar got unlucky with a safety car, but they all did well there. Imola, pretty good as well. I think, Lando holding on to his hards towards the end and having that pace to catch Max. I think most of us thought that race was done and 0.7 of a second in the end. But then McLaren's hands weren't fully clean either. They didn't give sufficient warning to Piastri in Q1. He impeded Magnussen, got a free place drop, actually out-qualified Lando on the Saturday, but dropped back to P5. It was a 2-4 in the end. Could have well been a 2-3, definitely points left on the table, I think, there. Monaco was good, Oscar within a 10th of Charles on pole, Lando within 2.5, and that race actually finished pretty much exactly in qualifying order. And Charles, well, he sold his soul to the devil to win that one, didn't he? Because it's absolutely honked since then. Now, Canada was obviously crazy tight in quali. Lando 21 thousandths off of pole, Oscar a 10th. But then Lando was flying in those kind of tricky conditions. The safety car came out with Logan Sargent binning it. We've seen the replays. Lando did have time to come in. You can say, all right, maybe Lando should have made the executive decision to come in. But also McLaren had plenty of time to be to Lando, right, if the SC comes out, box straight away. They could have done that. They didn't do it. Lando didn't win. Probably should have. And obviously Spain saw Lando take pole, didn't get as good a start as Max, lost position to both Max and George at the start, and the fact that he couldn't follow Max past George meant that, yeah, I think that one was more on Lando, for sure, that just early mistake at the start of the race, and that's the fine margins we're dealing with right now. One slightly weak start, and Max Verstappen in his Red Bull is going to pounce and make hay. Because then finally, Austria. McLaren as a team held up their end of the bargain. That penalty was fair, the 10-second penalty was fair, but what I would say is that if that was Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso going wheel to wheel with Max in that instance, would they have taken to the curb to fight another day, swallowed their pride somewhat because Max will challenge the limits? Would Lewis and Fernando would have came out with points from that race where Lando came out with none? I think they would have. Oh, and don't get me started on that Piastri penalty as well. God, the butterfly effect, if that hadn't been given. Maybe another 1-2, maybe another 1-3. Certainly a double McLaren podium, because them two were rapid in Austria. Yet P2 for Oscar, P nothing for Norris. Look, I hope McLaren, and I think Lando has, some learning to do here, and I hope they will, because, Max and Red Bull made that domination period just look easy. But even if you've got what is maybe technically the quickest car, it's so close, it's just not going to be a cakewalk. You need to be operationally excellent, composed in your decision making, and consistently quick. The benchmark has been set, and as much as McLaren deserve huge credit for turning that car around, that was an absolute dumpster fire at the start of last year, and Lando deserves huge credit, of course, for the performances he's put in and the fact he's been able to challenge Max now pretty consistently. There is still a way to go. There is improvement needed if they want to fight for a championship in 25. The ATR, the aerodynamic testing regulations, reset after Austria, of course, with McLaren P3 in the constructors, which means that McLaren for the rest of this year will have 10% more ATR than Red Bull, 5% more than Ferrari and 5% less than Mercedes. Look, at this mid-season point, do I expect Max to hemorrhage an 84-point lead in the next 12 races? I do not. I think that ship has now sailed. Max will win this title. But next season, 2025, it's a massive opportunity. Look, I think for the rest of this year, McLaren really need to prioritise this race management and communication. Lando needs to work on his, I think, composure in the car, and Oscar just needs to find a bit of race pace. If they work on these three things, I think McLaren will absolutely be arguably even favourites for certainly the Constructors' title in 2025, and Lando or Oscar a driver's title. I really think Oscar is that good. If they don't, then Max and Red Bull will run rings around them over the course of an entire 24 race season. They'll just be so much more consistent, and you could say the same for Mercedes, whoever's in that car alongside George Russell. I think George Russell, you know, Mercedes operationally know what they're doing, and they're finally back now, and Ferrari will find a way back up to the top in 2025. I'm confident of that. And who knows what will happen in 26, you know? Maybe it will chuck up the order again. McLaren can't afford to waste this opportunity because they really do have one. But that's what I think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. My name's Tomo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.